Remember the time Meg fell in love with Brian and even kissed him in front of everyone? But things got crazy when Meg became obsessed with Brian and forced him. Wink wink. It all started when Meg came home crying because no guy wanted to go to the school dance with her. Some boys even preferred committing crimes just to go to jail rather than be with her. This upset Meg, and she cried in front of Brian. To comfort her, Brian agreed to be her date for the dance. At the dance, Brian tried to be a good companion but ended up getting drunk, embarrassing Meg. Things got worse when a group of girls started bullying Meg, which made Brian angry. He confronted the girls, made some harsh jokes about their moms, and even made one of them cry before they left. Later, in his drunken state, Brian kissed Meg, sparking feelings of love in her. The next day, Meg started flirting with Brian during breakfast, even in front of Stewie. Stewie noticed and teased Brian, who admitted something had happened between him and Meg. Stewie laughed it off, but Brian wasn't amused. Hours later, Meg became more persistent, asking Brian to date her and kiss her again. Brian, desperate to get her off his back, lied and claimed he was gay, even saying he feels like kissing men when he sees them online. But Meg didn't care and kept pushing. Brian then made up another excuse, saying he was too busy and needed to help Chris with something that day. When he asked Chris what he was up to, Chris mentioned he was going to play with himself in his room, which grossed Brian out. Despite that, Brian agreed, just to avoid Meg telling Lois about their kiss. However, when Lois showed up unexpectedly, Brian panicked and went out with Meg to avoid being exposed. At the mall, Meg introduced Brian as her boyfriend, but Brian denied everything and, to make matters worse, bluntly told Meg their relationship would never work and they'd never be a couple. Meg was heartbroken, but instead of letting it go, she snapped. She started imagining Brian saying romantic and creepy things to her. Later, Meg baked Brian a pie, with one of the ingredients being her own hair. This freaked Brian out, realizing Meg's behavior had become unhinged. Scared, he went to Lois for help, but instead of helping, Lois slapped him for messing with her daughter. With no other options, Brian decided to confront Meg directly. When he entered her room, he found a shrine filled with creepy photos of himself. Meg, who was hiding behind the door, locked them both inside. Meg tied Brian to a chair, planning to have dinner with him and then do something unthinkable. Brian screamed, and moments later the police arrived. They arrested Meg and offered her help for her obsession. To assist with her recovery, they brought in Quagmire. Quagmire took Meg home and explained that at her age, she shouldn't focus on serious relationships but rather enjoy life. He gave her a self-help book to deal with her obsessive tendencies. Meg eventually let go, and Quagmire stayed behind to play poker with some friends.
And then another